Citizen Kane has some of the most striking cinematography in film history. While many of the shots in Citizen Kane rely on special effects, the real innovation in Kane is how Orson Welles took what could be ordinary scenes and elevated them with the cinematography.
Hello, Jedediah.
The most distinctive part of Kane's look is the expansive space and the depth of the shots. This was in stark contrast to the typical Hollywood films of the time, which tended to fill the screen with the actors, creating a cramped on-screen space. The shots in Kane were achieved by its cinematographer Gregg Toland, who employed two related techniques.
Jedediah, after you, Mr. Kane.
Wide-angle lenses, which expand the space on screen, and deep focus photography, which keeps everything in focus at the same time.
Welcome, Mr. Kane. Welcome.
However, it's true that years before Kane, Gregg Toland had been using deep focus photography and wide-angle lenses for years, working with directors such as William Wyler and John Ford.
Welcome home, Mr. Kane.
So, why is Citizen Kane cinematography considered so special? Well, the genius of Citizen Kane was not just that Welles used deep focus or wide-angle lenses. Welles' real innovation was discovering how a director should use these techniques, and ultimately created one of the greatest movies of all time. Deep focus photography had been in use since the silent era. However, when Gregg Toland shot Wuthering Heights in 1939, it was against the grain of most Hollywood cinematography, which favoured a shallower focus.
I don't want to get washed and I don't want to get dressed. Come along now.
In most films at this time, actors were usually staged in a narrow area in front of the camera, and the shallow focus meant that if actors are in focus in the foreground, the background is blurred.
Full dress rehearsal, 4 o'clock, Arch Street Theatre.
In contrast, deep focus shots in Citizen Kane create images which have a clear foreground, middle ground, and background, adding an extra dimension to the shot. Additionally, in contemporary films, cinematographers often favoured longer focal length lenses,
And it didn't take them after all.
which compressed the space on screen. Conversely, Toland used wide-angle lenses,
Bulldog's just gone press.
Well, hooray for the bulldog.
which enlarged the space on screen.
Gee, 11:30.
Please look at me.
Welles' innovation was to immediately see the dramatic potential of using deep focus photography and wide-angle lenses to stage complex compositions across several planes. He wasn't the only director to make use of wide-angle lenses. Contemporary directors usually fail to make use of their potential for dramatic staging, instead having actors huddled together in small rooms.
I'll give you 10 minutes to get to a phone and do your talking to the girl.
Directors in this period also usually preferred to shoot dialogue up close, editing between the speakers.
Just this. Thursby was shot down in front of his hotel about a half an hour after you left Bush Street.
Get paws off me.
In Citizen Kane, however, many of the dialogue scenes are shot without extensive editing, preferring to shoot the scenes with all the characters in shot, and often with little camera movement.
Besides pictures and print, I've got to make the New York Enquirer as important to New York as the gas in that light.
The problem with minimizing editing is that while shooting the whole scene, it could create a static theatrical look.
Got it all written out.
A related problem with deep focus is that although the whole image may be in focus, the human eye can only concentrate on one element at a time. Welles' genius is that he overcomes this in several ways. Firstly, he employs a very precise staging to control the audience's attention. Here's an example. At the start of the scene, only Bernstein, the reader, and his paper are visible. But, as the paper is pulled away, we reveal Thatcher in the middle ground, drawing us to his reaction.
and agrees to abandon all claim
Which
thereto.
means we're bust.
Finally, Kane enters at the right of the picture, and as he walks across the room, we suddenly become aware of the entire space.
Too old to call me Mr. Thatcher, Charles.
By revealing the scene piece by piece, Wells has managed to draw our attention across the whole scene without ever moving the camera. Likewise, as Wells had come from a theatrical background, he understood how to make sophisticated use of lighting to direct the audience's attention.
I'm staying here.
Characters frequently move between areas of light and dark.
Declaration of Principles. Don't smile, Jedediah. Got it all written out. Declaration of Principles.
This allows Wells to direct our attention not just to the speaker, but also the reaction of the listeners without employing cutting.
With a daily paper that will tell all the news honestly.
Wells understood how lighting can be expressive of characters' feelings and can be used to intensify drama.
You will continue with your singing.
However, in Citizen Kane, Wells also managed to direct the audience's attention in much more subtle ways.
I thought we might have a picnic tomorrow, Susan.
Huh?
One of Wells' innovations in Citizen Kane was in sound design, which was used in conjunction with the composition. In this shot, our eye is immediately drawn to the medicine bottle in the foreground. However, we quickly notice the heavy breathing, which makes us notice the shaded figure in the middle ground. Then, a knock at the door has us noticing the background. Despite the fact there's been no dialogue and the composition has been completely still, Wells has used sound effects to direct our attention across the scene, and we have a good understanding of what has happened. However, none of this is to say that Kane doesn't make use of editing or camera movement, which remain an integral part of the direction. Citizen Kane, of course, has some of the most famous camera movements in history. Regarding editing, Citizen Kane minimizes the number of cuts throughout, allowing the composition and the deep focus photography to do most of the work.
Go on, Mr. Thatcher.
However, when Wells does cut, it's not key to the standard call and response of most film dialogue.
Until he reaches his 25th birthday, at which time he is to come into complete possession.
Charles!
That is, he doesn't simply cut between the speakers, as in a standard shot reverse shot.
Don't you think it's rather unwise to continue this philanthropic enterprise?
Instead, Wells often holds the shot until he reaches a dramatic peak, which gives the cut a greater emphasis.
$1 million this year. I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place in 60 years.
And ultimately, this was Citizen Kane's great strength. Wells took existing cinematic techniques and film grammar and found out how to best apply them, creating a film which looks as crisp and beautiful as the day it was released.